Hey Artnerds, today we are taking a look at the Milo 48 color art marker set. This was generously sent to me by Taira, and there's a little bit of a story about that, so I'm going to go into that while we work on unboxing these markers. So a while back I'd heard from Taira that Dollar Tree was selling open stock alcohol markers. Now I hit 5 different Dollar Trees in Louisiana in the month of June trying to find just any of these markers. I couldn't find a single one. However, I did end up creating a really cool series that you guys will enjoy. I'll link that in the cards right here of Dollar Tree art supplies and what you can do with them. So I paid Taira for the markers because she found them up in Ohio and offered to send them to me, but my mail ate them. And Taira was generous enough to send me another set of markers. She says that these Milo markers are the same markers that they were selling at Dollar Tree. So I'm really looking forward to sharing these with you guys today. So Taira sent me these Milo markers straight off of Amazon. They arrived plastic wrapped, as you guys can see here, in a large cardboard box. And make sure you guys check the description because I'm going to have links for everything. So these are brush tip alcohol markers. Usually when I review very cheap markers, it's a bullet tip and a chisel nib, as you guys can see with some of my other alcohol marker reviews. These are interesting because they promise a brush tip, and I did not want to spoil this for myself. So other than trying to verify whether or not these are the markers sold at Dollar Tree, and I could not find any verification on that, so I do apologize. Other than searching for that, I haven't seen anyone else's reviews. I am going into this completely blind. I don't know how these handle, or I guess I should say I didn't know, since I am recording this in post. I'm doing the voiceover in post, so I actually know how I feel about these markers. But you guys are going to have to just keep watching to find out. This is also the first time I've done a full review where I narrate the narration, I guess, in post. So you guys are just going to have to bear with me while I get my bearings for this. But hopefully this video will be useful, helpful, and informative for you guys. And if there are other alcohol marker brands that you would like me to review, the best way to ensure that that's going to happen is to join me on Patreon at patreon.com/natosoup and join my Art Nerd community. Joining me over there, contributing $2 a month, contributing $1 a month, helps me afford the art supplies that I purchase to review. Initially, I had paid Taira about $24 plus shipping for the Dollar Tree markers. Now, the Milo markers cost quite a bit more than that. So, for the 48-piece set, the brush and chisel tip, they are $44.90 on Amazon. They're also available in an 80-piece set that's bullet and chisel tip for $34.90 on Amazon. So that's probably the set most people who are brand new to alcohol markers are going to go for. You can check out more of their products at the Milo site at miloartsupplies.com. I also have a link in the description below to their Amazon listing site. They also have 24 and 12-piece sets, with the 24-piece set being $24.90. So Milo also makes a pro line of their alcohol markers, and the only difference is those have a foam rubber nib and they cost a bit more. With the 24 set of the ones like I'm reviewing here today being $24.90 and the pro set being $32.90 on Amazon. But that's still around-ish, $1.50 per marker. Now, I don't have the pro markers, and as of right now, I don't plan on reviewing the pro markers, but if my art nerds were to really beg for me to review them, they really want to see that, I would consider it. So, I also have links for everything, like I said, in the description below. And here's a shot of some of the 48 colors that we received in this 48-piece set. So as you guys can probably see, we have a lot of warm grays in this set. And we're going to see how that shakes out, how those handle during the field test. That's going to be coming up in another video. So when I unboxed these markers, I noticed that the bottom of the box is very sturdy. The top is quite flimsy. There's no dividers on the interior of the box to keep these in place. They're kind of friction fit in there. So if you start removing a few, they're going to get kind of loose. So if you like to keep your markers organized, and I'm definitely that gal, you're going to want to buy a different kind of case for this. And there are a lot of really good inexpensive marker cases on Amazon. Now, if you buy the 80-piece set, it does come in a more reusable, travel-friendly plastic box. So if you're a teacher, if you're a librarian, if you travel a lot, that would be the set I recommend, just because you're going to get more markers, you're going to get more skin tones, and you're going to get a different box. So the markers themselves are twin-tipped, as we mentioned, with a gray color to indicate the brush tip, nothing to indicate the chisel tip. There is a color name and a color family number on the tops of each end, as well as a color-coordinated chip that kind of allows you to select what color, or to select your colors quickly. And I apologize that my camera is having problems with focusing, but hopefully you guys can see what I'm talking about. They uncap fairly easily. They're no more difficult than, say, Prismacolor markers or regular Copic markers. So they're not going to really fight you. They're also not as loose as the Spectra AD alcohol markers, so they're kind of somewhere in the middle. And to my knowledge, these are not refillable and do not have replaceable nibs. Just kind of digging around on their website, I didn't see any marker refills, and I didn't see any mention of refillability. So here we have our famous marker comparison. We have a Milo Art Marker, an Artist Loft, a Blick Studio, a Prismacolor. We have a Copic, and we will also have a Copic sketch for our just quick comparison. Now, generally, I compare all markers to Copic just because that's what most people are familiar with. So it gives everybody kind of a uniform baseline. Here are the markers uncapped. You can see that all markers but the Copic Chow have a color indicator on the cap, as well as a family number and name, except for Prismacolor, which just has the color number. Most of these markers have body screening that indicate which end is the brush and which end is the chisel. With some of these markers, the two Copics and the Milo Art Marker having a darker color on the brush tip. Now, I know it makes some of you guys super duper uncomfortable to see me leave my markers uncapped for so long. Don't worry, some of these are actually static photos, so it's not like I've left my markers uncapped for 10 minutes. But I also do this for you guys so that you guys can get a really good idea of what you're buying before you actually spend your money. So here's another shot, a different shot of our various markers. From this angle, they all look about the same. Now, the bottom two are refillable. The two Copic products are refillable, as well as the Blick Studio brush markers. And in a moment, I'll divide things up just to better show you guys where these things fall. So you guys can see the Milo Art Markers are very similar in body to the Artist Loft markers. They're slightly triangular, which helps prevent rolling. The main differences is on the Artist Loft marker, the color is on the chisel side, whereas on the Milo marker, the colored color is on the brush tip. And the Milo markers also have a few bumps, about 6 bumped grooves on each of the little triangular sides. And those are just to help with removing the cap. So if you have some grip issues, those might be a little bit easier to use. So I've divided my markers up into non-refillable and refillable, with the non-refillable markers on, well, they were on the left. And then I divided them up into foam rubber nibs, which are my preference. So the Prismacolor and the new version of the Artist Loft markers, and I have a review of that here on this channel that you guys can check out. On the left, those have foam rubber nibs. On the right, they're compressed fiber nibs. Now, the reason there's a lot of reasons why compressed fiber nibs are not great for alcohol markers. They're not, if you're going to use your markers often, that's not the best choice. They tend to fray, they break down really quickly, they can split and then you can't reform them. It's hard to fill small areas. It's hard to do detail work with them. They tend to be not flexible at all. So ideally with these kind of inexpensive fiber tip markers, you would have a fiber tip brush and then a bullet tip for details on the other side, or maybe even like a fine liner on the other side. And I've kind of pulled away from doing inexpensive alcohol marker reviews, except by extreme request, just because they all tend to be kind of the same. I was excited about the Milo markers because they are brush tip, and that's something I'm still interested in reviewing. So now we're going to start doing our swatches. I'm going to swatch all 48 markers. I want you guys to keep in mind that this is in time lapse, and I'm swatching this in a Strathmore mixed media sketchbook. This is the same. I'm on volume 4 now. I use this sketchbook for all of my alcohol marker reviews. I have used this type of sketchbook for my alcohol marker reviews for the past 10 years now. Dozens of markers and over 4 volumes. So I use this because it helps me stay consistent, and it helps me give you guys consistent feedback on the variety of markers that we talk about over the years. Now, something that I noticed is that these are felt tip nibs like the old Artist Loft brush markers. Some of those are actually still out in the wild in sets. I like the grooves on the caps. Those really help with accessibility. I like that the brush tip is marked with a gray color. That's consistent with many of the other alcohol marker brands. I like that the rectangular bodies are not prone to rolling, and I'm a little bit disappointed to find that there was no colorless blender in this set. Of course, since I review markers, I have a lot of different colorless blenders, so I don't actually need one, but my concern is for people who are new to alcohol markers, it would be nice to have an all-inclusive set. So this swatching was done with the chisel tip, which allowed me to control the ink flow so we could get consistent color swatching, and I felt like these were very prone to bleeding, and they are very fumey. The fumes are sweet and a bit nauseating, so if you're prone to headaches, these will probably trigger a headache for you. There's only 6 skin tones in the whole set, and only 3 are any good: 103, 98, and 91, with the darker browns being the better skin tones for this set. And there are a lot of gray tones, including some decent warm grays. The bodies are kind of large. They're a little bit difficult for me to hold comfortably, but if you enjoy larger markers, larger pins, these could be great for you. And I get that there are color families, but the order is kind of counterintuitive to me, and you guys will see. I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on, because I swatched these in just kind of the order I grabbed them, and then I decided to sort this out into color families and re-swatch from there to see if it makes any more sense. The brush has no flex. What is the point of a brush that's going to fray because it's fiber if it has no flex at all? What is the point of including a brush with that? So I know Milo has their Pro markers that have the foam rubber. I think they could get rid of the fiber tip ones and just go with the more expensive Pro markers, and that would still be quite a deal. But I will disclose, I have not tried the Pro markers, and at this point in time, I don't have any intention to review them. The brush is also very blendy, so both ends are extremely bleedy. There's a lot of color diffusion, a lot of spidering. It's difficult to control the colors. So I decided to sort my markers out into cohesive color families, and I did that based on the number that is first, kind of like how the Copic numbering system works. So this is before I had a chance to fully sort all the markers out. In a moment, we will see how they look once they've been sorted into color families and then sorted numerically. And the color families are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 10s, 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. And then 100s, warm grays, cool grays, and then black is 120. And I'm hand grouping the different color families for you guys. Some color families only have a couple colors. In fact, one color family only had one color in it, and then some have a bunch of colors. And I have them in numerical order, and to me it just doesn't make sense. So like Copic, you have a couple of you have the color number. So like I'm looking at a green, I'm looking at G28, right? G for green, 28 for like saturation, and then 8 for the darkness. But the Milo markers aren't really sorted that way, and they seem to top out at 80 colors, so it doesn't have to really be sorted that way. It's not like the Copic system that has 300 some odd colors in it, but if you're used to working with color families to help you with your color picking, it still doesn't make a lot of sense. If any of you guys use Milo markers and you have some better insight into the color families in general, please let me know. Now there's also a 2, a 3, and a 6 in my set, and those are just kind of standalone. They're not really grouped in with the rest of the color family. So I guess those are like single digit colors. So here are my re-swatched color families, and then they are organized in the case by color family. And again, this case is not going to hold your marker. If you have any kind of organizational system, this case is not going to do it for you. So I recommend buying another case. So next, I want to try seeing compatibility testing a little bit. So I'm going to grab a few different colors. We're going to test how reactive these markers are to isopropyl alcohol, as well as to Copic Colorless Blender. Now in the past, I used to do multi-compatibility testing where I use the blenders from various different brands to swatch with these, but I find that if I do 90% isopropyl alcohol and the Colorless Blender, that about covers our bases. For me, alcohol marker compatibility, brand to brand compatibility is really important. I don't own any one brand. I have several favorite brands that I like to use interchangeably. So if I can't utilize markers as part of a mix, then it's not as useful for me. So you guys saw me swatch the brush tip and the chisel tip. Now I've zoomed in to give you guys a better angle on how little the brush tip flexes. And I'm putting an extreme amount of pressure on this, and it just kind of smooshes down. There's no snap, there's no flex to it. Copics, for example, have a super tip, a foam rubber tip, and you guys can see I'm smushing it down, but it bounces right back into place. Now, these markers are very Copic reactive to the point where it causes a fair amount of bleeding. And I'm going to drip some isopropyl rubbing alcohol onto this as well. And then I'm going to give it a moment to react and soak in. What do you guys think of the new white Teflon background? This is a non-absorbent, impervious sort of craft sheet, but instead of the brown Teflon I used to do, it's white Teflon now, since I've gotten some complaints that my desk looks dirty, but I think it still looks kind of dirty. So I may end up switching back over to the normal Teflon later on. And now I'm going to do the ball test. Now, I used to do this a lot, and then I quit doing it in favor of the Rainbow Road test, but some of my wonderful patrons on Patreon say that they prefer seeing this test. It gives them a good idea of how well these markers will handle. So I'm very happy to bring it back. And it basically demonstrates how well these markers layer, how well they blend, how well they play into each other, and it shows us how much they're going to bleed through. So I color this like I would normally color a ball. I'm working from very light orange to a darker red, so I'm trying to use a fairly wide color gamut. And I'm going to apply a lot of layers of marker, do a lot of blending, do a lot of color working back and forth, and we'll see how reactive these markers are and how well they blend into each other. So as I mentioned earlier in the video, I think the the bleeding is going to be an issue, especially with like controlled illustrations. Like if I were to render someone's face, it would start to be an issue. Now I am going to do a full field test illustration in another video, and I'll also utilize that as a chance to kind of show you guys how to work with these markers if you already own them. So don't let my negative review discourage you. You're not any less of an artist if you're using these. This is not a comment about you, what you can afford, or what you enjoy. It's simply a review of the markers for people who might be interested in buying them and haven't purchased them yet. So I'm swatching some additional colors because I really want to work my way to like a deep, dark red, a cool red. And looking at this in post, you guys can't see it here because my camera is trying to compensate for the color, but the colors ended up desaturating, dulling down quite a bit. Now I'm doing a blended line of these same colors where I blend like with the previous color. So as you guys can see, I blended that orange back out with yellow. I'm going to blend this darker orange back with our lighter orange, etc. And this also helps give me an idea of how well these markers blend and how smooth a transition I'll be able to get with these. Now, this is not indicative of the whole set. As I mentioned earlier, some color families for these markers are better represented than others, and the yellows, oranges, and reds have a lot of representation. Now, while I was doing the stripe blend test, I noticed that the bodies are fairly well constructed and solid, despite the disappointing brush tip. So these are pretty solidly built markers, and the amount of bleed is just really worrisome. I'm kind of preparing myself mentally for how the field test is going to go. However, they have some really bright and brilliant colors, though I do feel like a lot of our 48 color gamut is a bit wasted with all of the cool grays, the warm grays, etc. I would have liked to have seen more skin tones and more pastels. We are very much lacking in lighter colors. All of the colors are very vibrant and saturated, which you might think is great for alcohol markers, but unlike watercolor markers where you can use water to really blend those out and build up your color, it doesn't quite work the same way with alcohol markers. Yes, you can use the Colorless Blender to blend those back, but we don't actually have a Colorless Blender in this set. So my final verdict, only a full field test will really help me decide how I feel about these markers, but I do have some suspicions and can make a prediction about what my opinion will be. There are not enough skin tones in this set. It's a 48 color set. I would like to see more skin tones. The paler, lighter colored skin tones are particularly lacking in this set, but we do have some nicer, darker skin tones. So at least those are represented. Usually those are the ones that end up getting cheated a bit. And it's going to make it difficult for me to render my usual test subject, Kara, the main character from my comic, 7-inch Kara. And I may skew my illustration style to make the best use of these markers, because when I do the field test, not only do I want to comment on how they handle, but I want to utilize it as a bit of a tutorial for the artists who already own the product that I'm field testing. There are not enough pastels in this set, which makes it difficult to build up colors, and the lack of an included Colorless Blender will make blending color to white difficult for a person who's new to markers. Now, who is this set for? The inclusion of so many grays means fewer pastels, skin tones, and other colors that might be interesting or useful for a younger artist, but this set doesn't handle well enough for a professional who might utilize grayscales to use as a daily go-to. So someone like a draftsman or a product designer this set doesn't handle well enough for someone who's working as a professional. The brush nibs dump a lot of color but offer no flex, so small details and subtle nuance will be challenging to to achieve. And as I keep mentioning, that bleeding seriously concerns me, and the fumes are some of the strongest fumes I've smelled with alcohol markers. Now, I have reviewed a few inexpensive alcohol markers over the years. I have a really old fine color review. I went back and I re-reviewed the fine colors in a different body type. I have a Swatch marker set that's supposed to be trying to be Shinhan Twin Touch, but is really not. I've also reviewed the Artex alcohol markers and a few more inexpensive alcohol markers. So these are not worse than any of the other ones that I've reviewed, and the brush tip does handle better than if I were just using a bullet tip. Sometimes you just want to saturate an area with color, and a chisel tip is just not going to do the job very well. The brush tip is excellent for that. As you guys can see though, bleed through is really going to be an issue with these markers, bleeding through to the next page. So if you're working in a sketchbook and you're picky about not marking up every single page, I recommend you work with a blotter underneath your sheet, just a piece of scrap paper or scrap cardstock or cardboard even underneath to absorb that extra alcohol marker. I believe this set is intended for younger artists who might not have the money for, say, Copic markers or Prismacolor markers or even the Blick Studio Sketch markers, but would like to start playing with alcohol markers. My biggest concern for those users, for those young artists, is going to be the fumes. These are very, very whiffy markers, and if you're prone to headaches, if you're prone to sensitivity, please work in a well-ventilated area. Turn on the fan. I also really prefer, for packaging, I really prefer packaging that travels well and encourages us to store our markers appropriately, that is horizontally. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this review was helpful, and I want to send a huge thanks to Taira for sending me these markers. I'll see you guys again really soon with the field test. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!